It took just one spin, one breath for Zara Johnson to stop the city. A 16-year-old homeless black girl, dancing outside a cultural fortress built to keep her kind out. From her window above, Victoria Whitmore, curator of elitism in high heels, watched with disdain. "Security!" she hissed, pearl necklace glinting. But what she couldn't see from her glass castle was that the miracle her guests were waiting for had just begun on the sidewalk. The sun hit the marble front of the Metropolitan Cultural Center like a spotlight, but the real performance was happening on the street. On the worn gray concrete outside, Zara Johnson moved with the elegance of someone born to dance. Not on a stage, but in survival. Her body twisted, turned, flowed like silk in the wind. Every movement was truth carved into air. She wore no costume, just torn leggings, old sneakers, and a heart trained by pain. Yet she danced as if nothing in the world could touch her. And for those few minutes, nothing could. Coins clinked into her cap. Passers-by paused. Phones came out. Applause whispered on the wind. But inside the top-floor office, shielded behind tinted glass and ego, Victoria Whitmore narrowed her eyes. "Look at that," she muttered, voice dipped in disgust. Her assistant followed her gaze but said nothing. "Call security," Victoria snapped, adjusting her designer glasses. "We have an elite charity gala tonight, and I won't have this kind of ambience ruining our reputation." Victoria's career was built on exclusion. For her, art was about pedigree, not power. Technique didn't impress her. Appearances did. And a black girl, barefoot and brilliant, outside her door. That was personal offense. Moments later, 3 thick-necked security guards pushed through the entrance. "Hey, you!" one barked, moving straight toward Zara. "Cut it out! This is private property." Zara froze mid-step, but she didn't shrink. "Sidewalk's public," she replied, standing tall. Her voice calm, her spine steel. "I'm not breaking any law." The largest guard snarled, "You're disturbing guests." With a kick, he sent her cap flying. Coins skittered across stone, glinting like tiny insults. "Get out before we make a call you regret." Across the street, a luxury black SUV rolled to a stop. Inside sat James Patterson, real estate tycoon, and his 12-year-old son Marcus, wheelchair-bound since birth. Marcus had refused his therapy sessions for weeks. But today, something had pulled him upright in his seat. "Dad, stop." James frowned. "That girl," Marcus whispered, breath caught. "She dances like Mom used to describe in her stories." James looked over, just as Zara knelt to pick up her scattered coins, with poise, not panic. She whispered something to the guards, too soft to hear, but enough to make them all step back as if slapped by silence. "What did she say?" Marcus asked, eyes wide. Zara's lips had barely moved, but her message had landed like prophecy. "You'll remember me one day. You'll wish you'd treated me with respect." She turned to walk, her bag over her shoulder, her dignity intact. And just before crossing the street, her eyes locked with Marcus's through the glass. That moment, wordless, still, crackled with recognition. 2 souls, different struggles, same ache. Both knew what it was to be looked at, and never truly seen. Suspicion was the only certainty in Zara Johnson's life. It followed her like breath, unspoken but always there. She had grown used to eyes narrowing as she passed, to the way people's smiles thinned once they noticed her skin, her clothes, her presence. So, when the guards had kicked her cap and scattered her coins, it didn't shock her. Not even when they puffed their chests and barked at her like she was trash. She just stood, still, calm. From a window high above, Victoria Whitmore smiled, arms folded, pleased. "Problem solved," she said under her breath, retreating into her air-conditioned world of silk walls and silent racism. Zara didn't flinch. She turned and walked, slow and straight-backed, her chin raised as if the cement beneath her feet was a stage and every footstep was choreography. Inside her coat pocket, her fingers touched something smooth and cold. A phone. One swipe and she could make a call. Not for help, for execution. But she hesitated, staring at the screen. Then quietly, to no one but herself, she said, "Not yet." She tucked it away and disappeared into the city's hum. 3 days passed. But James Patterson couldn't forget her. The girl. The dance. The silence that had said more than any scream. But it was Marcus who remembered her deeper, who carried her memory like a song stuck in his chest. Every morning began the same. "Will we see her again, Dad?" On the third morning, James gave in. He canceled meetings, ignored calls, loaded Marcus into the car and started driving. "This is a long shot," muttered Harrison from the passenger seat. "You don't even know her name." But James only replied, "My son does." After 2 hours and 5 wrong turns, they found her, dancing in a small plaza near an old cafe. Marcus let out a breathless gasp. "There she is!" James stopped the car. They approached slowly. Zara noticed them immediately and stepped back, guarded. But Marcus's grin, wide and true, eased the tension. "You're the girl who dances," James said, voice soft. "Marcus hasn't stopped talking about you." Zara tilted her head. "Your dad seems all right," she said to Marcus. "Way better than the men in suits who hate smiles." Marcus nodded seriously. "They were mean. Daddy was angry." James knelt next to his son's chair. "Would you join us for dinner?" he asked. "We have a garden. Marcus would love to see you dance without the world pushing back." That night, she danced under garden lights. No stage, no guards, no sneers. Just open air and Marcus's laughter bouncing off the trees. She twirled and pivoted in a way that pulled his arms into motion. It wasn't just dancing. It was freedom, shared. Afterward, as Marcus rested, James finally asked, "Where did you learn to move like that?" Zara looked away. "My mom. She was a ballerina. Got into Prestige Academy. Same place I got thrown out of. They found out she was pregnant with me. Victoria Whitmore never gave her a second chance." James felt the weight of it. "She crushed her dream?" Zara nodded. "Before I was even born." And just like that, James understood. Zara wasn't some lost kid. She was the calm before a reckoning. Zara Johnson wasn't just a street dancer anymore. She was a strategist, calm, focused, and far ahead of the game. She moved through the city like shadow, unnoticed by most, underestimated by all. But inside her was a storm, building quietly. And now, it was almost time. At the Metropolitan Cultural Center, Victoria Whitmore prepared for war. Not a public one, but the kind fought with cameras, contracts, and security personnel. She ordered facial recognition systems installed, specifically coded to flag Zara's image. She doubled the guards. "We can't afford another disturbance," she declared. "Our reputation demands we maintain standards." But what Victoria didn't know was that her security upgrade was being watched. Zara had spent the last 3 years learning how to survive and how to listen. She'd trained herself in skills people never expected from a homeless teenager. Skills that didn't belong on paper, but in movement, stealth, memory, and code. During one of Marcus's therapy visits, he looked at her and said, "You're really smart," then smiled. "And you have the name of a warrior prince." Zara had laughed softly. "Your uncle is right," she whispered, "and warriors always have a plan." Later that evening, she showed James a thick folder. Inside were files, documents, photographs, and financial records, all connected to Victoria Whitmore. "Where did this come from?" James asked, stunned. He flipped through contracts that reeked of bias and donations that looked more like bribes. Zara simply said, "Invisible people see everything. Some of them are very good with computers." The truth was deeper. She had formed quiet alliances with activist hackers, digital ghosts who targeted racial injustice in elite systems. With her unique access and ability to move unnoticed, she had become a trusted source and an agent of truth. Meanwhile, Marcus's transformation continued. Dancing with Zara brought joy, yes, but also measurable progress. "It's like she's a natural therapist," Dr. Williams observed, amazed. "The results are borderline miraculous." As Marcus found healing, Zara found fuel. She uncovered more. Documents proving Victoria had buried the dreams of dozens of black and brown artists over the years, denying auditions, erasing scholarships, manipulating selection boards. This wasn't just about her mother anymore. It was about every kid who never got past the lobby. Everyone thought Zara would vanish once the center locked its doors tighter. But they misunderstood. Victoria's crackdown didn't frighten Zara. It gave her what she lacked. Proof. The night of the elite charity gala arrived with velvet gowns, crystal chandeliers, and millions of dollars pledged. Victoria walked through the crowd, shaking hands with senators, CEOs, and celebrity patrons. Tonight, she beamed at the mic, we celebrate the largest donation in our history. She gestured toward James. Please welcome our top donor, Mr. James Patterson. Polite applause. Camera flashes. James stepped onto the stage. He glanced at Marcus in the front row, then turned to the crowd. Thank you, Victoria, he said slowly. But before we talk about donations, I'd like to share a story. A subtle tension swept the room. A few weeks ago, James began, my son and I witnessed a young girl, 16, black, brilliant, publicly humiliated by this institution's security for the crime of dancing. Gasps, shifting in chairs, and behind her perfect smile, Victoria Whitmore felt the chill of her empire beginning to crack. Victoria Whitmore took one step toward the microphone, but James Patterson's gaze stopped her cold. The story gets more interesting, he said, turning back to the crowd. Because that girl you humiliated is the daughter of Zara Johnson, the same Sarah whose scholarship was revoked 17 years ago by then-assistant Victoria Whitmore, because she was pregnant. Gasps rolled through the grand hall. James, this is inappropriate, Victoria began, but he cut her off with a cold smile. You want to talk about inappropriate? Behind him, a massive screen descended from the ceiling. It lit up with a letter dated 2007. Victoria's signature stamped at the bottom. The reason for canceling Zara Johnson's future. Pregnant women do not fit the profile of excellence our institution upholds. A collective gasp spread. Phones lit up. Victoria stumbled to defend herself. That was a different time. Our policies have evolved. But James clicked the remote again. One by one, more documents appeared. Rejection letters. All signed by Victoria. All denying young black and Latino students with vague excuses about cultural fit. In just 5 years, James said, voice now steel, she denied 47 black youth, while white students with lower qualifications were accepted. Then came the final blow. An audio recording played over the loudspeakers. Victoria's voice. We must maintain our standards. This institution can't become a social project for inadequate people. The hall erupted. Murmurs turned to outrage. Journalists scrambled. From his wheelchair, Marcus grabbed the microphone. Zara taught me that dance has no color, he said. She helped me walk. But you threw her away. Because she's black. The words, simple and brutal, silenced everyone. Victoria tried to fight back. Those clips are out of context. I've dedicated my life to art. But another voice echoed across the room. Zara stepped through the main doors. She wore an elegant black gown. At her side walked 10 black and Latino youth, each one once denied by Victoria. You dedicated your life, Zara said, walking with regal calm, to keeping people like us out. Another slide appeared. Bank records. Victoria had embezzled over $500,000 from diversity grants, funneling the money into personal accounts, for 5 years. You didn't just discriminate, James said. You stole, from the very communities you excluded. Victoria collapsed into a chair. An hour ago, she'd been a celebrated curator. Now, she was a hashtag. #, Victoria Whitmore racist, trending across the globe. Zara stepped up to the stage. For 17 years, she said, you made people like my mother believe we weren't enough. How many dreams did you crush? Camera crews filmed live. Politicians shifted in their seats. Zara didn't seek revenge. She offered justice. Starting today, she said, This center has new leadership and a new mission. James stepped forward. I'm buying the Metropolitan Cultural Center, he announced, and renaming it the Zara Johnson Institute for Inclusive Arts. He turned to Zara. And she will be the youngest artistic director in our history. Victoria was quietly escorted out by the same guards who once shoved Zara into the street. Her final glimpse. Zara. Dancing. This time, center stage, under a standing ovation. Months later. Zara stood at the front of a grand rehearsal hall. Behind her, 50 dancers from every background. Her scholarship program had gone national. Once more, she called out, with feeling. Marcus, now 13, watched proudly from the front row, no longer in a wheelchair, only supported by slim crutches. Zara's voice echoed. Art knows no boundaries. The world now called her the dancer who changed everything. But to Marcus, she was still just Zara, the girl who taught him to move and believe. It was a warm spring afternoon. Rehearsal paused. Children laughed as they stretched and reset. Zara stood in the center of the grand hall, adjusting a young boy's posture, her presence grounded but radiant. Zara, Marcus called from the front row, leaning on his crutches. Dad said you got another offer, to speak at Oxford this time? She smiled gently, brushing back her braids. In just 6 months, she had become one of the most sought-after voices on institutional reform and racial justice in the arts. Harvard, the Sorbonne. Even TED Talks had requested her insight. Her story had rewritten the rules of what inclusion looked like. The documentary, The Dancer Who Changed Everything, had been nominated for an Oscar, sold in 47 countries, subtitled in 30 languages. But Zara hadn't changed. Across town, Victoria Whitmore opened another envelope. Rejection. Again. This one from a local dance studio. Not as a teacher, but as a front desk receptionist. No institution, cultural, academic, or commercial, wanted her name in their records. Her scandal had become a symbol of elitism, corruption, and racial gatekeeping. Her 30-year career had been erased in a single night. And now, all she had was a one-bedroom apartment on the second floor of a crumbling walk-up. She stared at the peeling walls, a haunting echo of the marble corridors she once ruled. The court fines had swallowed her fortune. The stolen funds, over $1 million in embezzled diversity grants, had been returned. But not her name, not her pride. Her family had quietly cut ties. Even her old friends from the elite circuit avoided her in public, crossing the street rather than acknowledging her. At trial, the judge had been merciless. You weaponized race and power, he had said. You used public funds meant to include the excluded, to build a wall around yourself. That is not only unethical, it is criminal. Victoria had lost everything, her title, her property, her future. And for the next 10 years, she would be legally banned from holding any role, paid or volunteer, in education, the arts, or community leadership. Back at the Zara Johnson Institute, James Patterson stood at the tall window of his new office. From above, he watched Zara lead a class of 30 children with special needs through a rhythmic movement workshop. They smiled, they struggled, they laughed. Every gesture was built with patience and love. The program she created, inspired by Marcus, now served over 400 children across 3 states. Entire families were moving to the city just to join the waiting list. Mr. Patterson, Harrison poked in. The Netflix producers are here. They want to discuss the series. James smiled. Tell them it's not my story anymore. He looked back at the rehearsal room. It belongs to director Zara now. Let her decide who gets to tell it. Zara turned toward the glass and saw him watching. She waved, then returned her attention to the kids. Her voice rang through the room. Again. But this time, feel it like you mean it. The music began again. No boundaries, no glass doors, just movement and meaning. James leaned back in his chair, smiling at the Netflix producer's question. This was never my story, he said. I was just fortunate enough to be there, when someone extraordinary needed a door opened. A few days later, Zara sat under studio lights across from a CNN anchor. Over 12 million people watched live. From homelessness to one of the most respected cultural leaders in the world. How did you do it? She answered with calm clarity. I could have responded to prejudice with more prejudice. I could have chosen destruction. But I realized, the best revenge isn't hurting those who hurt you. It's building something so extraordinary that they realize what they lost by underestimating you. When asked about Victoria Whitmore, she didn't gloat. She tried to erase me, Zara said. But she ended up erased by the very history she thought she could control. No bitterness in her voice, only truth. I feel sorry for her, Zara continued, because she lived believing she was more valuable than others, just because of the life she was born into. And now, too late, she knows human worth can't be inherited. It has to be earned. Beside her, Marcus nodded. Now 13, articulate beyond his years. Zara taught me something simple, he said. When someone hurts you, you've got two choices. Become like them, or become something so much better. She chose better, and redefined what excellence means. The interview ended with a montage. Young dancers from every background. Black, Latino, Asian, disabled, leaping, spinning, composing. Names once left off applications now stood proudly in acceptance letters from Juilliard, the Royal Academy, NYU. The screen faded to a photo, a mural at the Institute's entrance. Zara Johnson, arms raised in motion. Underneath, talent knows no color, class, or limitation, only hearts open enough to see it. That same night, Victoria sat alone in her dark apartment, cheap wine in one hand, rejection letters on the table. She stared at the screen, at what might have been. For a moment, she allowed herself to imagine a different legacy, if she had chosen to include, instead of exclude. But it was too late. Meanwhile, Zara was home. A modest house she now owned, where she planned future expansions with James and Marcus. Do you know Victoria's biggest mistake? She asked, reviewing contracts for new branches in LA, Chicago, and Atlanta. What? James and Marcus asked together. Zara's eyes burned with quiet fire. She thought she knew me. She saw a homeless black girl and assumed that meant no intelligence, no connections, no strength. She never imagined I had the power to beat her at her own game, and then use that win to open doors for thousands more. Her revenge wasn't humiliation. It was legacy. 3 years later, Victoria worked part-time at a department store, forgotten. Zara stood on the cover of Time magazine. 100 most influential people in the world. 12 cities, 10,000 lives transformed. And more to come. Victoria had tried to erase Zara Johnson, but it was Victoria who disappeared from history. Zara had learned something eternal. The best revenge is not retribution. It's becoming everything they told you you couldn't be, and then turning that power into light for others.